The words landed like broken glass across the polished marble floor of the reception hall, and Gemma Forrester felt every syllable cut through her. "And let's be honest," her sister Vanessa was saying into the microphone, her white dress shimmering under the chandelier light, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry to every corner of the room, but soft enough to sound like concern. "While we're all celebrating love tonight, some people in this very room have been hiding their own secrets. My dear sister Gemma, for instance, has been carrying on with someone entirely unsuitable, someone not even human." The room went silent. Gemma's wineglass trembled in her hand, the burgundy liquid threatening to spill over the rim. She sat frozen at her table near the back, surrounded by distant cousins who were now staring at her with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror. Her mother, seated at the family table up front, had gone white as bone. "A vampire," Vanessa continued, and now her voice had lost its false sweetness entirely. "My sister has been sneaking around with a vampire. I thought everyone should know, since we're all here celebrating honest, real love between two humans who can actually have a future together." Gemma wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. She had never told anyone except her diary, never breathed a word about the nights she'd spent in the garden behind the old cathedral, talking with Mordecai until dawn threatened. Never mentioned how his pale hand had felt in hers, cool and steady. Never admitted that when he looked at her with those silver eyes, she felt seen in a way no human man had ever managed. And now, Vanessa had weaponized it, had taken the most private, precious thing in Gemma's heart and thrown it to the crowd like raw meat. Gemma stood on shaking legs, meaning to flee, but before she could take a single step toward the exit, movement caught her attention. Near the front of the hall, at a table she hadn't noticed before because the guests there had been so unnaturally still all evening, a figure rose. He was tall, impossibly tall, and as he straightened to his full height, the candlelight seemed to bend toward him rather than away. His hair was white as winter, falling past his shoulders, and his skin had the translucent quality of fine porcelain. He wore a black suit that looked like it cost more than Vanessa's entire wedding, tailored to perfection across broad shoulders and a lean frame. When he turned to face the room, his features were sharp and aristocratic, beautiful in the way that ancient statues were beautiful, cold and perfect and utterly inhuman. Gemma's heart stopped. Mordecai Zephyrion. Not just Mordecai, the vampire she'd met by accident 6 months ago when she'd gotten lost looking for a late-night coffee shop. Mordecai Zephyrion, whose full name she'd only learned 2 weeks ago. Mordecai Zephyrion, the vampire king of the entire Eastern Territories. He had never told her his title. She'd discovered it by accident when she'd seen his face in a newspaper article about the treaty negotiations between the Human Council and the vampire courts. And now he was here, at her sister's wedding, and Gemma realized with a sick lurch that he'd been here the whole time, watching, listening. "I choose her now," Mordecai said, and his voice carried effortlessly across the hall without him needing to raise it. It was a voice accustomed to command, to being obeyed without question. "Gemma Forrester, I claim her publicly before all witnesses here, human and vampire alike." The silence that followed was absolute. Gemma couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room spun around her, faces blurring into a wash of shock and fear and fascination. Mordecai's silver eyes found hers across the distance, and something in them made her knees weak. Not compulsion. She'd felt that before from lesser vampires and knew how to recognize it. This was something else, something that looked almost like apology, like resignation. Like a man who'd been holding something back for so long that having it dragged into the light was almost a relief. "I have loved her since the first night I met her," he continued, still looking at Gemma, speaking to her as much as to the room. "I have hidden it to protect her from exactly this moment, to spare her the scrutiny and judgment that comes with being associated with my kind. But since that courtesy has been stripped away, I will not allow her to face this alone." He moved then, and it was like watching water flow uphill, smooth and impossible. He crossed the distance between his table and hers in seconds that felt both too long and too short, and then he was standing beside her, his presence a wall between her and every staring eye in the room. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. he was even more. Gemma had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze, and when she did, she saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Vulnerability, raw and undisguised. "I did not mean to make this choice for you," he said quietly, for her ears only. "Forgive me." "You didn't make it," Gemma heard herself say, her voice steadier than she felt. "Vanessa did." "Then I have made it worse by claiming you so publicly." His jaw tightened. "But I could not stand by and let her turn your feelings into a weapon without consequence." Somewhere near the front of the room, Vanessa was sputtering into the microphone, but Gemma couldn't hear the words. The room had erupted into chaos, voices rising in a cacophony of shock and outrage and excited gossip. She was dimly aware of her father standing, his face purple with fury, of her mother sitting frozen, hands pressed to her mouth, of Vanessa's new husband trying to take the microphone away from his bride. "We should leave," Mordecai said. "Now, before this escalates further." "I can't just leave my sister's wedding," Gemma started to say, but then her father was storming toward them, and she saw the look on his face. "You," her father spat, jabbing a finger at Mordecai. "Get away from my daughter." Mordecai didn't move, didn't even blink. He simply looked at Gemma's father with an expression of such complete calm that it was more intimidating than any show of aggression could have been. "No," Mordecai said simply. "I am a senior member of the Human Council," her father said, his voice shaking with rage. "I negotiate the treaties that allow your kind to exist in our cities. I can make your life very difficult, vampire." "You can try," Mordecai replied, and there was no threat in his tone, just simple statement of fact. "But I'm a king, and you are a councilman. We both know how that hierarchy functions." Gemma's father's face went even more purple. "Gemma, get away from him, now." Gemma looked at her father, at Mordecai, at the room full of people who had just witnessed her most private secret dragged into the light and turned into a spectacle. "No," she said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I won't." Her father recoiled as if she'd struck him. "You would choose this creature over your own family?" The words hit harder than Gemma wanted to admit, but before she could respond, Mordecai's hand found hers. His fingers were cool, his grip gentle but unmistakably possessive. "She is choosing herself," Mordecai said quietly, "perhaps for the first time. Do not punish her for that." "You've bewitched her," her father snarled. "This is compulsion, it has to be." "It is not." Mordecai's voice had gone dangerously soft. "And you insult both your daughter and me by suggesting she is incapable of making her own choices." Gemma's mother had appeared beside her father now, her face pale and drawn. "Gemma, please," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Think about what you're doing. Your father's position, our family's standing, everything could be destroyed if you pursue this." The weight of that crashed over Gemma like a wave. Her father was indeed a senior council member, one of the architects of the fragile peace accord between humans and vampires that had been negotiated over the past 5 years. There were strict rules in that accord, boundaries that were not to be crossed, and one of the clearest boundaries was the prohibition on romantic or sexual relationships between humans and vampires. The council had deemed such unions too dangerous, too likely to create complications and power imbalances that could destabilize everything. If a council member's own daughter was found to be violating that prohibition, especially with the vampire king himself, it could be used as ammunition by the hardliners on both sides who had opposed the peace from the beginning. "I didn't ask for this," Gemma said, and her voice cracked. "I didn't ask for Vanessa to expose me. I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," her mother said, and there were tears in her eyes. "But now that it's happened, you have to make this right. End this relationship, publicly denounce it, and we can weather the storm. Please, Gemma." Gemma felt Mordecai's hand tighten almost imperceptibly around hers. She didn't look at him, couldn't bear to see what might be in his eyes. "She needs time to think," Mordecai said. "We all do. I will take her somewhere safe, and we will discuss this like rational beings." "You'll take her nowhere," Gemma's father snapped, but Mordecai was already moving, already guiding Gemma toward the exit with a hand at the small of her back. No one tried to physically stop them. Whatever else could be said about vampires, their physical superiority to humans was well documented and undeniable. Gemma's father would not risk a public confrontation that he couldn't win, but as they walked through the murmuring crowd toward the door, Gemma heard her sister's voice one more time, high and triumphant and cruel. Run away together then. See how long you last when the whole world turns against you. The night air was cold against Gemma's face when they finally stepped outside, but she welcomed it. The reception hall had felt suffocating, too warm and too full of hostile eyes. Out here, in the dark parking lot behind the venue, she could finally breathe. Mordecai released her hand and took a step back, giving her space. The loss of his touch made her feel unmoored, adrift. "You did not deserve that," he said quietly. "Any of it." Gemma laughed, and it came out bitter. "Which part? My sister publicly humiliating me, or you claiming me in front of everyone like I was a piece of property?" She saw him flinch, actually flinch, and immediately regretted the words. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That wasn't fair." "It was entirely fair," Mordecai replied. "I handled that poorly. I should have remained silent, let you deal with the situation as you saw fit. But I could not." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. "I could not watch her hurt you and do nothing." Gemma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite her jacket. "Why didn't you tell me that you're the vampire king?" "For the same reason I never spoke of my feelings," Mordecai said. "To protect you. A woman associated with any vampire faces scrutiny and judgment. A woman associated with the vampire king faces danger. There are factions among both humans and vampires who would see you as a target, a vulnerability to exploit. So you were just going to what? Keep meeting me in secret forever? Never tell me how you felt?" "I had not thought that far ahead," he admitted. "I only knew that I wanted to keep seeing you, speaking with you, that every moment in your presence felt like something precious I had no right to, but could not give up." The confession should have made Gemma's heart soar. Instead, it felt like another weight pressing down on her. "And now everyone knows. My father's career could be ruined, my family's reputation destroyed, all because Vanessa couldn't stand seeing me with something she didn't think I deserved." "Your sister is cruel," Mordecai said flatly, "and jealous." "She's been cruel since we were children," Gemma said. "I was always the quiet one, the plain one. She was beautiful and charming and everyone's favorite. But I didn't care because I had my books and my work at the library, and that was enough." She laughed again, humorless. "And then I accidentally found something she couldn't have. A vampire king who actually wanted to talk about literature and philosophy instead of just admiring himself. No wonder she wanted to destroy it." Mordecai moved closer, and Gemma looked up at him. Even in the dim parking lot light, he was almost painfully beautiful, his white hair practically glowing, his silver eyes reflecting the street lamps like polished mirrors. "She has not destroyed it," he said. "Unless you wish her to." "What?" "I claimed you publicly," Mordecai said. "Among vampires, that's a binding declaration. It means I have marked you as mine, that any who wish to harm or insult you must first deal with me. But among humans, it is merely words. If you wish to reject that claim, to walk away and rebuild your life without me in it, I will not stop you." Gemma stared at him. "After everything that just happened, you just let me go?" "I have hidden my feelings to protect you," Mordecai said quietly. "I will not now force my presence on you for the same reason. You deserve choice, Gemma. The choice Vanessa tried to take from you. So I'm giving it back." "And if I choose you?" Gemma whispered. "If I say I want this, want you, even knowing what it might cost?" Something shifted in Mordecai's expression, like ice beginning to crack. "Then I will spend whatever time it takes, proving that you made the right choice." Gemma reached out and took his hand again, felt his cool fingers close around hers. "I need time," she said. "I need to think, and I need to figure out how to salvage this mess. But I don't want to walk away. I don't want her to win." "Then she will not," Mordecai said, and there was steel beneath the words. "Come. I have a place not far from here where you can rest and think without interference." He led her to a car parked at the edge of the lot, a sleek black vehicle that looked like it cost more than Gemma made in a year. She slid into the passenger seat and let herself sink into the leather, closing her eyes against the memory of her sister's face, twisted with malicious satisfaction as she'd spoken into that microphone. Mordecai drove in silence, which Gemma appreciated. She needed quiet to process everything, to sort through the tangle of emotions warring inside her. Anger at Vanessa, fear for her family, confusion about what happened next, and underneath it all, a warm, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this disaster could somehow become something good. They pulled up to a building in the heart of the city's historic district, an old converted mansion that had been divided into luxury apartments. Mordecai led her up to the top floor, and when he unlocked the door, Gemma stepped into a space that was both impossibly elegant and surprisingly comfortable. The floors were dark hardwood, the walls paneled in rich mahogany. But the furniture was modern, clean lines and soft fabrics, and the bookshelves that lined two walls were packed with volumes that ranged from ancient leather-bound tomes to contemporary paperbacks. "This is yours?" Gemma asked. "One of several residences," Mordecai said. "I keep this one for when I need to be in the city for council negotiations. It seemed appropriate." Gemma wandered over to the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. She recognized some of the titles, obscure histories and philosophical treatises she'd only ever heard referenced. "You really do love books." "I've had a great deal of time to read," Mordecai said, and there was dry humor in his tone. 300 years provides ample opportunity." Gemma turned to look at him. 300? "Give or take a decade. I stopped counting precisely sometime in the 18th century. He shrugged, the gesture almost human. "Does that frighten you?" "It should," Gemma said. "You're 300 years old and I'm 24. That's absurd." "It is," Mordecai agreed. But it doesn't frighten me," Gemma continued. "It just makes me wonder what you could possibly find interesting about someone as young and inexperienced as me." Mordecai crossed the room in 3 strides and took her face in his hands, tilting her head up so she had to meet his eyes. The touch was gentle, but his gaze was intense, burning. "You are brilliant," he said, his voice low and fierce. "You are kind and curious, and you see beauty in things most people overlook. You spend your days helping others find the stories they need, matching readers to books with an intuition that borders on magic. You ask questions that make me think differently about things I thought I had understood centuries ago. You make me feel less alone." Gemma's breath caught. "Mordecai." "I have lived 300 years, he continued. "I have known countless people, human and vampire alike. None of them have made me feel the way you do, as though I am not just a king, not just a creature of power and politics, but simply myself, as though I am enough, just as I am." "You are," Gemma whispered. "You're more than enough." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Gemma didn't move. When his lips met hers, they were cool and soft, and the kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, like he was afraid she might shatter. Gemma rose up on her toes and kissed him back harder, her hands fisting in his jacket. She poured all of her frustration and fear and desperate hope into that kiss, and felt him respond, his arms coming around her and pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Mordecai rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I have wanted to do that for months," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid," he said simply. "Afraid of what it would mean. Afraid of what it might cost you. I am not accustomed to fear, Gemma. It is not an emotion I have felt in a very long time. You terrify me." Gemma laughed softly. "Good. You terrify me too." He pulled back slightly, searching her face. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know," Gemma said honestly, "but we should figure it out together." They ended up sitting on the couch, Gemma curled against Mordecai's side, his arm around her shoulders. It felt natural, comfortable, as though they'd done this 100 times before, instead of navigating entirely new territory. "Tell me about the council," Gemma said. "Tell me exactly how bad this is." Mordecai was silent for a moment, and Gemma knew he was choosing his words carefully. "The prohibition on human-vampire relationships is one of the core tenets of the peace accord. The Human Council insisted on it, arguing that such relationships create too many complications. Questions of consent when one party is immortal and vastly more powerful. Questions of what happens if a human wishes to be turned. Questions of loyalty when war breaks out again, as it inevitably will, according to the pessimists on both sides. And you agreed to it? I argued against it, Mordecai said. I believe adults should be free to choose their own companions, regardless of species. But I was outvoted by the other vampire leaders, who saw the prohibition as a small price to pay for peace, and it was easier to agree when I believed it would never personally affect me. And now it does. Now it does, he confirmed. Your father is right that this could be used as ammunition by those who oppose the accord. There are humans who believe all vampires should be exterminated, and vampires who believe humans should be subjugated. They have been waiting for an excuse to break the peace, and a council member's daughter in a relationship with the vampire king is a spectacular excuse. Gemma's stomach churned. So what do we do? Publicly end things like my mother wants? That would be the safe option, Mordecai said neutrally. But I do not want to, he said, and his arm tightened around her. I have spent 300 years being cautious and political and doing what is best for my people. For once, I want to be selfish. I want to choose what I want. And what do you want? He looked down at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. You. I want you, Gemma Forrester. In whatever way you will have me, for however long you will have me. Gemma reached up and traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips, marveling at the smoothness of his skin, the sharp edges of his bone structure. He was inhumanly beautiful, but there was nothing cold about him right now. He was warm with emotion, with want, with something that looked very much like love. Then we fight, Gemma said. We find a way to make this work without destroying everything. There has to be a way. You have more faith than I do, Mordecai said, but he was looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Someone has to, Gemma replied, and you've been doing this king thing for too long. You're thinking about politics and strategy. I'm thinking about people. And what do people tell you? Gemma thought about her father's purple face, her mother's tears, Vanessa's cruel satisfaction. Then she thought about the way Mordecai had stood beside her, the way he'd claimed her publicly not to possess her but to protect her, the way he looked at her right now like she was something precious. They tell me that my family is scared, she said slowly, that Vanessa is hurting in some way I don't fully understand, that you're trying so hard to do the right thing that you're afraid to do anything at all. Mordecai made a soft sound, almost a laugh. Perceptive. And they tell me that maybe the problem isn't the relationship itself, Gemma continued. Maybe the problem is that the prohibition exists at all. Maybe instead of hiding or ending this, we need to challenge the rule. That is a fight that could take years, Mordecai warned. Then it's good we're starting now, Gemma said firmly. And it's good you're immortal because apparently we might need the time. This time Mordecai did laugh, and the sound was beautiful, rich, and genuine. You are remarkable. I'm a librarian with too much stubbornness and not enough sense, Gemma corrected, but I'm your librarian if you want me. I want you, Mordecai said, more than I have wanted anything in decades. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Gemma felt some of the tension of the evening finally begin to drain away. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would be consequences and difficult conversations and probably more public humiliation before this was done. But for the first time since Vanessa had grabbed that microphone, Gemma felt like maybe, just maybe, things might actually be okay. Tell me about the other vampire leaders, she said eventually. If we're going to challenge the prohibition, we need them on our side, don't we? Some of them, Mordecai agreed. There are 7 regional kings and queens who form the Vampire Council. I am the most powerful by virtue of age and territory, but I cannot simply dictate terms to the others. We govern by consensus. So we need to convince at least a majority. Ideally, all of them, Mordecai said. A divided vampire council is a weak vampire council, and we cannot afford weakness right now. Who's most likely to support us? Mordecai considered. Lilith of the Southern Territories is pragmatic and has always been sympathetic to human-vampire cooperation. Nikolai of the Western Reaches is a romantic at heart, though he hides it well. Those 2 I could likely bring around. And the others? Thornus of the Mountain Holds is conservative and traditional. He believes vampires should keep to themselves. Celestine of the Coastal Regions is unpredictable, guided more by whim than logic. Corvus of the northern wastes cares only for power and will support whatever position benefits him most. And Seraphon of the island territories is young for a queen, barely a century old, and tends to follow the lead of the older rulers. Gemma absorbed this. So we have two probable allies, one opportunist we can maybe bargain with, one wild card, one likely opponent, and one follower. That's not terrible odds. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Gemma said, but it's not impossible either. We just need a strategy. Mordecai shifted so he could look at her properly. You are taking this remarkably well. Most humans would be having hysterics by now. Oh, I'll have hysterics later, Gemma assured him. Probably around 3 in the morning when my brain finally catches up with everything. But right now, I'm running on spite and stubbornness. My sister wanted to destroy me, and I refused to let her win. Spite is an excellent motivator, Mordecai said solemnly, though his eyes gleamed with amusement. Isn't it? Gemma yawned, the adrenaline of the evening finally wearing off. I should probably go home at some point, face my family, deal with the fallout. Stay here tonight, Mordecai said. Your family needs time to calm down, and you need rest. You can face them tomorrow when everyone is thinking more clearly. Gemma knew she should argue, should insist on going home and confronting the situation immediately. But she was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, and the thought of walking back into her parents' house right now made her want to curl up in a ball and hide. Okay, she said, but I don't have anything to sleep in. You can borrow something of mine, Mordecai offered, and there is a guest room if you prefer. Gemma thought about it, thought about sleeping alone in a strange room, trying to process everything that had happened. Thought about sleeping beside Mordecai, feeling the security of his presence. I'd rather stay with you, she said, if that's okay. Something softened in Mordecai's expression. More than okay. He led her to the bedroom, which was as elegantly appointed as the rest of the apartment. The bed was enormous, covered in dark silk sheets that probably cost more than Gemma's entire bedroom set. Mordecai dug through a dresser and produced a shirt that would hang past her knees. The bathroom is through there, he said, gesturing to a door. Take your time. Gemma escaped into the bathroom and took a moment to stare at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her carefully styled hair falling out of its pins. She looked like she'd been through a war, which she supposed wasn't far from the truth. She washed her face and changed into Mordecai's shirt, which smelled like him, some combination of old books and expensive cologne and something indefinably other. When she emerged, Mordecai had changed as well, trading his formal suit for simple black sleep pants and nothing else. Gemma tried not to stare at his chest, at the lean muscle and pale skin, tried and failed. See something you like? Mordecai asked, and there was an edge of teasing in his voice she'd never heard before. Maybe, Gemma admitted, feeling her cheeks heat. He crossed to her and cupped her face again, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. We do not have to rush anything. I have waited months for you. I can wait longer. I know, Gemma said, but I don't want to wait. I don't want to keep being careful and cautious and afraid. Vanessa already took that option away from us. She did, Mordecai agreed, but that does not mean we must do anything you are not ready for. Gemma pushed up on her toes and kissed him, hard and demanding, and felt him respond with a hunger that made her knees weak. His hands slid down to her waist, pulling her against him, and Gemma melted into his embrace. They tumbled onto the bed together, all tangled limbs and desperate kisses. And for a while Gemma forgot about everything except the feeling of Mordecai's mouth on hers, his hands in her hair, the cool press of his body against hers. Eventually, they slowed, breathless and flushed, and Mordecai pulled back to look at her. We should sleep, he said, though he sounded reluctant. Probably, Gemma agreed, equally reluctant. They settled under the covers, and Gemma curled against Mordecai's side, her head on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, slow and steady, much slower than a human heart, but still reassuringly present. Mordecai, she said into the darkness. Yes? Thank you for standing up for me tonight, for not letting her turn my feelings into something shameful. His arm tightened around her. You never have to thank me for that. Your feelings are not shameful. They are a gift I do not deserve, but will cherish nonetheless. Gemma smiled against his chest. You're very dramatic for someone who claims not to be a romantic. I am 300 years old, Mordecai said dryly. I contain multitudes. Gemma laughed, and it felt good, felt like release. Good night, Your Majesty. Mordecai, he corrected gently. Just Mordecai when we are alone. I am tired of being a king tonight. Good night, Mordecai, Gemma murmured, and let sleep pull her under. She woke to sunlight streaming through gaps in the heavy curtains and the smell of coffee. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, but then memory crashed back and she sat up with a gasp. Mordecai was sitting in an armchair by the window, fully dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, reading a book. He looked up when she moved. Good morning, he said. I made coffee. I do not drink it myself, but I keep it on hand for guests. What time is it? Gemma asked, rubbing her eyes. Nearly 11. You are exhausted. Gemma groaned. My phone is probably exploding with messages. It has been buzzing intermittently for the past hour, Mordecai confirmed. I did not want to wake you. Gemma found her purse and extracted her phone, wincing at the number of notifications. 17 missed calls from her mother, 8 from her father, 3 from Vanessa, which Gemma deleted without listening to, and 1 from an unknown number. She opened the voicemail from the unknown number first, and her heart sank as she heard the voice on the other end. Miss Forrester, this is Councilman Drake. I'm calling regarding the incident at your sister's wedding last night. The full Human Council has been convened for an emergency session this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Your presence is requested, as is that of Vampire King Mordecai Zephyrion. Please confirm your attendance. Gemma looked up at Mordecai. The council wants to see us this afternoon. He nodded, unsurprised. I received the same message. I have already confirmed our attendance. What do you think they want? To make an example of us, Mordecai said bluntly, to remind everyone why the prohibition exists and what happens when it is violated. Your father will likely be called upon to discipline his own daughter publicly to prove his loyalty to the council's rules. Gemma's stomach turned. That's barbaric. It is politics, Mordecai said, and it is effective. Nothing ensures compliance like forcing someone to punish their own family. I won't let him do that, Gemma said fiercely. I won't put him in that position. Then you will have to make the first move, Mordecai said. Challenge them before they can challenge you. How? Mordecai set down his book and came to sit beside her on the bed. You are thinking like someone who has been caught doing something wrong. Stop. Start thinking like someone who has done nothing wrong and will not apologize for it. Gemma stared at him. You want me to go into the council meeting and just refuse to back down? I want you to go into that meeting and make them question why the prohibition exists in the first place, Mordecai said. You are a librarian. You deal in information and persuasion. Use those skills. I'm not a politician. No, Mordecai agreed. You are better. You are genuine. Use that. Gemma took a deep breath, then another. Okay, I can do this. We can do this, Mordecai corrected. You are not alone in this, Gemma. Whatever happens in that meeting, I will be beside you. The council met in a converted courthouse in the old part of the city, a building with high ceilings and marble columns that was meant to inspire awe and intimidation in equal measure. Gemma felt both as she and Mordecai climbed the steps and entered the main chamber. The council sat on a raised platform at the far end of the room, 7 men and women in formal attire who looked down at the floor where Gemma and Mordecai were directed to stand. Her father was among them, his face carefully blank. Gemma's mother sat in the gallery behind them, looking like she hadn't slept. The rest of the gallery was packed with people, human and vampire alike. News of the wedding incident had apparently spread fast. Gemma recognized reporters with cameras, council staff, and several vampires who had the same otherworldly beauty as Mordecai. The other regional rulers, she realized, they'd come to watch. Councilman Drake, a silver-haired man with cold eyes, called the meeting to order. We are here to address a serious violation of the Human-Vampire Peace Accord, he began. Specifically, the prohibition on romantic relationships between humans and vampires. Miss Gemma Forrester, you stand accused of conducting such a relationship with Vampire King Mordecai Zephyrion. How do you plead? Gemma opened her mouth, but Mordecai spoke first. This is not a trial, he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. Miss Forrester has committed no crime. She has violated an arbitrary rule that should never have been written into the accord in the first place. Drake's eyes narrowed. The prohibition was agreed upon by both councils, including you, King Mordecai. I agreed under protest, Mordecai said, and I reserve the right to challenge rules I believe to be unjust. By violating them? Drake's voice dripped with disdain. By living my life as I see fit, Mordecai replied calmly. I am a king, councilman. I do not ask permission to choose my companions. Gemma saw her father flinch, and she knew they were losing this. Mordecai's arrogance, however justified, was only making the council more defensive. Your Majesty, she said quietly, touching his arm. Let me. Mordecai looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes, but he stepped back slightly, yielding the floor. Gemma looked up at the council, at the faces of people she'd known her whole life, people who had been at her birthday parties and graduation, people who were now looking at her like she was a stranger. You want to know if I'm in a relationship with Mordecai Zephyrion, she said. The answer is yes. I care about him deeply. He cares about me. We have hurt no one. We have broken no moral law. We have simply chosen each other. You have broken the accord, Drake said. I have broken a rule, Gemma corrected. A rule that was written out of fear, not wisdom. You prohibit human-vampire relationships because you're afraid of the complications they might create. But fear is not a good foundation for law. It is not fear, another councilwoman said, her voice sharp. It is pragmatism. Humans and vampires are too different. The power imbalance is too great. Is it? Gemma challenged. Mordecai is one of the most powerful beings on this planet. I am a librarian. By your logic, we should be the least compatible couple imaginable. But somehow, we make each other better. He challenges me to think bigger. I remind him to feel more deeply. Where is the harm in that? The harm is in the precedent, Drake said. If we allow this, we open the door to countless complications. What happens when others follow your example? What happens when humans want to be turned to be with their vampire lovers? What happens when vampire families and human families clash over inheritance, over custody, over 1,000 other legal tangles? What happens when we face those challenges together and find solutions? Gemma countered. What happens when we choose to trust each other instead of hiding behind fear? The peace accord was supposed to be about building bridges, not maintaining walls. Easy words from someone who has not thought about the consequences, Drake said coldly. I have thought about nothing but the consequences since my sister exposed my relationship last night, Gemma shot back. I have thought about my father's career, my family's reputation, the potential damage to the peace. I have thought about all of it, councilman, and I have decided that the risk is worth it. You have decided? Drake's voice rose. You are 24 years old. You are in no position to decide matters of such importance. Then who is? Gemma demanded. You, the council, the people who wrote a rule without ever considering whether it was just. I may be young, but I am not a child. I have the right to choose who I love, and you have no right to take that away from me. The chamber erupted into murmurs, and Drake banged his gavel. Order! We will have order! Gemma's father stood abruptly. If I may address the council, Drake waved a hand. Councilman Forrester. Gemma's heart clenched as her father stepped forward. She knew what was coming, knew he would have to distance himself from her to save his own position. My daughter has always been headstrong, her father began, and Gemma braced herself for the denouncement. She gets that from her mother, and from me, if I'm being honest. Gemma blinked. That wasn't what she'd expected. When we wrote the prohibition into the accord, her father continued, I supported it. I believed it was necessary to maintain clear boundaries, to prevent exploitation. But standing here now, listening to my daughter speak, I find myself wondering if we were wrong. Drake stared at him. Councilman Forrester, you cannot be serious. I am entirely serious, Gemma's father said. My daughter has violated a rule, yes. But in doing so, she has forced us to confront a question we should have asked from the beginning. Are we building peace, or are we simply managing mutual distrust? If we cannot trust humans and vampires to make their own choices about relationships, how can we trust them to coexist at all? That is a false equivalency, another councilman argued. Is it? Gemma's father looked around the chamber. We have spent 5 years negotiating treaties and trade agreements and territorial boundaries. We have worked together to solve problems that seemed insurmountable. Why? Because we chose to trust each other, at least a little. My daughter is asking us to take that trust one step further. I do not think that is unreasonable." Gemma felt tears prickling at her eyes. Her father was risking everything, his career and his reputation, to support her. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him, but she stayed where she was, knowing the moment was too fragile to disrupt. Drake was looking around the chamber, clearly trying to gauge the mood. Gemma followed his gaze and saw that opinion was divided. Some council members looked scandalized, others looked thoughtful. And in the gallery, several of the vampire rulers were watching with interest. One of them stood, a woman with white hair piled high on her head and a dress that looked like it cost more than a car. "If I may," she said, her voice like honey over steel. "Queen Lilith," Drake said, inclining his head. "Please." Lilith descended from the gallery with a grace that made Gemma feel clumsy by comparison. She stopped beside Mordecai and laid a hand on his shoulder, the gesture one of solidarity. "I have known Mordecai for 2 centuries, she said. I have seen him lead armies and negotiate peace. I have seen him build alliances and destroy enemies. I have never seen him care for anyone the way he clearly cares for this human woman. That alone tells me something important." "And what is that?" Drake asked. "That she is extraordinary," Lilith said simply. "Mordecai does not give his regard lightly. If he believes Miss Forrester is worth the risk, worth the complications, then perhaps we should trust his judgment." Another vampire stood, a man with sharp features and cold eyes. Or perhaps King Mordecai has allowed his personal desires to cloud his judgment. He would not be the first ruler to be led astray by a pretty face. Mordecai's expression went dangerously blank. "Corvus, choose your next words carefully." Corvus smiled, showing teeth. "I merely point out that emotions make us weak. The prohibition exists for good reason." "The prohibition exists because humans fear us and we disdain them," Lilith said sharply. "It has nothing to do with logic or safety and everything to do with prejudice on both sides." "You would overturn the accord for one relationship?" Corvus challenged. "I would improve the accord by removing unjust restrictions," Lilith replied. "There is a difference." The debate was spiraling outward now, council members and vampire rulers weighing in from all sides. Gemma felt the moment slipping away from her, the focus shifting from her and Mordecai to abstract arguments about policy and principle. She looked at Mordecai and saw something shift in his expression. He stepped forward, and the room fell silent instantly, responding to the authority in his posture. "Enough," Mordecai said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. "You are arguing about hypotheticals while ignoring the reality standing before you. Gemma and I are not a hypothetical. We are real. Our feelings are real. And we are asking you to recognize that." He reached out and took Gemma's hand, and she felt the now familiar coolness of his touch, the strength in his fingers. "I am the Vampire King," Mordecai continued. "I have ruled for longer than most of you have been alive. I have earned the right to choose my own path, but I am not asking you to defer to my authority. I am asking you to see reason, to see that the prohibition serves no one's interests and limits everyone's freedom." "And if we refuse?" Drake asked. Mordecai's expression hardened. "Then Gemma and I will continue our relationship regardless, and you will have to decide whether to destroy the peace over it, because I will not hide, I will not pretend. I have made my choice, and I stand by it." The challenge hung in the air, undeniable. The council could back down, or they could push forward and risk shattering everything they'd built. Drake looked around at his fellow council members, clearly trying to find consensus. Gemma saw her father watching her, something like pride in his eyes, saw her mother in the gallery, dabbing at tears, saw Vanessa nowhere, conspicuously absent from the fallout she'd created. "I propose a compromise," a new voice said. Gemma looked and saw another vampire standing, this one younger looking with dark hair and a considering expression. Queen Seraphine, she remembered. "What kind of compromise?" Drake asked warily. "The prohibition stands for now," Seraphine said, "but we create an exception process. Couples who wish to petition for recognition can do so, and their cases will be judged individually. Miss Forrester and King Mordecai will be the first such petition, and their experience will guide future policy." "That is barely different from removing the prohibition entirely," Corvus objected. "It is completely different," Seraphine countered. It maintains the principle that such relationships require careful consideration, but it acknowledges that blanket bans are unjust. It is, as I said, a compromise. Drake looked like he'd bitten into something sour, but he didn't immediately object. Gemma saw several other council members nodding, clearly relieved at having a middle path offered. The petition process would require approval from both councils? Drake asked. Both councils, majority vote, Zephyrion confirmed. And the couple would need to demonstrate that their relationship is genuine, stable, and does not create undue complications for either community. How long would such a petition take? 3 months, Zephyrion said, long enough to be meaningful, short enough not to be cruel. Gemma felt Mordecai's hand tighten around hers. 3 months of scrutiny, of having their relationship picked apart and analyzed. 3 months of uncertainty, but it was better than nothing. I would support such a compromise, Gemma's father said. Several other council members murmured agreement. As would I, Lilith added. Other vampire rulers nodded. Drake looked defeated. Very well, we will put it to a vote. All those in favor of creating an exception process as described by Queen Zephyrion? Hands rose around the chamber, both human and vampire. Not everyone, but enough. More than enough. The motion passes, Drake said heavily. Miss Forrester, King Mordecai, you will submit your petition within the week. A hearing will be scheduled for 3 months from today, and until then, you are permitted to continue your relationship, but you will be expected to conduct yourselves with discretion and propriety. Is that understood? Understood, Mordecai said. Yes, Gemma added. Drake banged his gavel. This session is adjourned. The chamber erupted into noise, people talking and arguing and speculating. Gemma felt dizzy with relief, barely able to process that they had actually won something, that they had a chance. Mordecai pulled her aside as people began to filter out. Are you all right? I think so, Gemma said. I can't believe that actually worked. You worked, Mordecai said. You spoke from the heart and people listened. That was all you. We did it together, Gemma insisted. Her father approached, looking older than Gemma had ever seen him. May I speak with you, both of you? They stepped into a smaller side room, away from the crowd. Gemma's mother followed, closing the door behind her. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Gemma's father said, I owe you an apology, both of you. Last night I reacted badly, and this morning I let fear guide me. I should have trusted you. Dad, Gemma started, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. Your sister exposed you cruelly, and my first thought was for my career, for the family reputation. That was wrong. You are my daughter, and I should have stood by you immediately. Instead, I needed a council hearing to remind me of what matters. You stood by me when it counted, Gemma said, blinking back tears. That's what matters. Her father pulled her into a hug, and Gemma melded into it, feeling some of the tension of the past day finally release. I still don't fully understand this, her father admitted, pulling back to look at Mordecai. You're a vampire king. You could have any woman, human or vampire. Why my daughter? Because she sees me as more than a title, Mordecai said simply. Because when I am with her, I feel like myself instead of a role I play. Because she is brave and kind and brilliant, and I am better for knowing her. Gemma's mother was crying openly now. Do you love her? Mordecai looked at Gemma, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Yes, I do. It was the first time he'd said it outright, and Gemma felt the words settle into her chest like something warm and permanent. I love him too, she said, looking back at her parents. I know it's complicated and strange and probably doomed to cause problems. But I love him, and I'm not going to apologize for that. Her mother hugged her next, fierce and tight. Then we'll face the problems together, as a family. They talked for a while longer, working through logistics and emotions and the 1,000 tiny details that would need attention over the coming months. Eventually, her parents left and Gemma and Mordecai were alone in the quiet room. 3 months, Gemma said. That's not very long to prove our relationship is genuine and stable. Then we had better make good use of the time, Mordecai said. Over the next 3 months, Gemma learned what it meant to be scrutinized. Every time she and Mordecai appeared in public together, there were cameras and reporters. Every conversation was potentially being recorded, every gesture analyzed. It was exhausting and invasive and occasionally infuriating, but there were good moments too. Mordecai took her to vampire court functions, formal affairs where she was introduced to ancient creatures who'd seen centuries of history. Some were welcoming, curious about the human who'd captured their king's attention. Others were coldly polite, clearly disapproving. Gemma learned to navigate both with grace. She also learned about Mordecai's life in ways she never had before. He showed her his private library, a room full of books he'd collected over 300 years, each with a story. He told her about the wars he'd fought, the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd lost. He opened up in ways Gemma suspected he rarely did, and she treasured every revelation. In turn, she led him into her world. They spent evenings at her small apartment, cooking together in her tiny kitchen. She took him to her favorite bookstore and watched him browse the shelves with the intensity of someone meeting old friends. They argued about philosophy and literature, and laughed at terrible movies, and slowly built something real between them. The petition process required them to submit to interviews with both councils. Some were straightforward, asking about their relationship history and future plans. Others were clearly designed to trip them up, to catch inconsistencies or reveal ulterior motives. One councilman asked Gemma if she wanted to be turned into a vampire. "Eventually," she said honestly. "Not now, but someday, if Mordecai and I are still together. I want to live long enough to see where this goes." "And you don't see that as evidence of an unhealthy power dynamic?" the councilman pressed. "The vampire can offer immortality, and the human cannot refuse such a gift." "It's not a gift I'm asking for right now," Gemma pointed out. "And if Mordecai tried to pressure me into it, I would walk away. I'm not here because he can offer me immortality. I'm here because I love him." Another councilwoman asked Mordecai what he saw in Gemma. "She makes me feel human," Mordecai said, "in the best possible way. She reminds me what it's like to be surprised, to be challenged, to grow. I have spent centuries feeling complete and self-sufficient. Gemma makes me want to be more." The interviews were published, dissected, argued over. Public opinion was divided. Some people saw their relationship as a beautiful example of cross-species cooperation. Others saw it as a dangerous precedent that would lead to disaster. Still others simply found it entertaining drama to follow. Gemma tried not to read the coverage, but it was impossible to avoid entirely. One particularly vicious op-ed suggested she was a gold digger using Mordecai for his wealth and power. Another implied Mordecai had used compulsion or manipulation to make her fall for him. Both were painful, both were false, and both made Gemma want to scream. "Let them say what they will," Mordecai told her one night when she was particularly upset. "Words cannot touch what we have." "They can poison it, though," Gemma said. "If enough people say we're wrong, eventually we might start believing it." "Never," Mordecai said firmly. He took her face in his hands and looked at her with that intense silver gaze. "I know what we are, Gemma. I know what I feel when I'm with you. No amount of external noise can change that truth." "Promise?" "I promise," he said, and kissed her until she believed it. One unexpected complication was Vanessa. After the wedding, she'd gone silent, avoiding family gatherings and refusing to return calls. Gemma had assumed her sister wanted nothing to do with her, that the exposure had been a final act of cruelty, and Vanessa was done. But 2 months into the petition process, Vanessa showed up at Gemma's apartment. She looked tired, her makeup less perfect than usual, her designer clothes rumpled. "Can we talk?" she asked. Gemma wanted to say no, wanted to slam the door in her sister's face, but curiosity and old habit won out. "Fine, come in." They sat in Gemma's small living room, and for a long moment neither spoke. "I'm sorry," Vanessa finally said. "For what I did at the wedding. I was angry and petty and cruel, and I hurt you deliberately. I'm sorry." Gemma had imagined this conversation 100 times, had planned all the things she would say, but now that it was happening, she just felt tired. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Because I was jealous. Because you, the quiet, boring sister, had something I'd never have. Because I've spent my whole life being the pretty one, the popular one, the one everyone wanted, and it was never enough. And then you meet a vampire king and he falls for you. And I couldn't stand it. So you tried to destroy it. I wanted you to feel as small as you made me feel," Vanessa admitted, "which is insane because you never made me feel anything." I did that all on my own. I spent so long defining myself by being better than you that when you finally had something I didn't, it broke me a little." Gemma stared at her sister. "You have everything, Vanessa. You're beautiful and charming, and you just married a successful lawyer who adores you. What could you possibly envy about my life?" "That you're happy," Vanessa said simply. "I don't think I've ever been happy the way you are when you're with Mordecai. I don't think I even know what that looks like." The confession hung in the air, raw and painful. Gemma didn't know what to say to it, how to respond to her sister's broken honesty. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Vanessa continued. "I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I see what I did wrong. And for what it's worth, I've been following the petition process. I've read the interviews, and I think maybe I was wrong about you too. I think maybe it's real." "It is real," Gemma said quietly. "It's the most real thing in my life." Vanessa nodded. "Then I hope you win. I hope the councils approve your petition, and I hope someday you can forgive me, but I'll understand if you can't." She stood to leave, but Gemma stopped her. "Vanessa." Her sister turned. "I do forgive you," Gemma said. "Not because you've earned it, but because I'm tired of carrying anger around. But that doesn't mean I trust you, and it doesn't mean we're okay. You hurt me badly, and that's going to take time to heal." "I understand," Vanessa said. "Thank you for even talking to me." After she left, Gemma sat alone in her apartment for a long time, processing. She called Mordecai and told him about the conversation, and he listened without judgment. "Your sister is deeply unhappy," he observed when she finished. "That does not excuse her actions, but it explains them." "I know," Gemma said. "I just wish she'd found a healthier way to deal with it than trying to destroy my life." "People rarely choose healthy ways to handle pain," Mordecai said. "They choose familiar ways, and your sister's familiar way is apparently cruelty disguised as concern. You're very wise for someone who claims not to understand human emotions." "I have had 300 years to observe human behavior," Mordecai said dryly. "One picks up a few things." The 3-month mark arrived faster than Gemma expected, and slower than she wanted. The final hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon, and Gemma took the day off work despite her manager's disapproval. "This is important," she told him. "This is my entire future." "Your future is returning books and helping patrons," he said sourly, "not running around with vampires." Gemma quit on the spot. She'd been thinking about it anyway, tired of working for someone who viewed her relationship as entertainment rather than her life. She'd already had 2 offers for better positions at larger libraries, and she accepted one on the way to the hearing. Mordecai met her at the courthouse steps, looking impossibly elegant in a dark suit. "You're glowing," he observed. "What happened?" "I quit my job and got a better one," Gemma said. "Figured I might as well make today about new beginnings." He kissed her, right there on the courthouse steps in front of cameras and spectators, and Gemma kissed him back, not caring who saw. The final hearing was surprisingly anticlimactic. Both counsels had reviewed all the evidence, all the interviews, all the public and private testimony. They'd made their decisions already. This was just the formal announcement. Councilman Drake called the session to order and ran through the procedural details with obvious reluctance. Then he looked at Gemma and Mordecai, standing together in the center of the chamber, and said, "The councils have reached a decision regarding your petition." Gemma held her breath. By a vote of 10-4 on the Human Council and 5-2 on the Vampire Council, your petition is approved. Your relationship is officially recognized under the terms of the Human-Vampire Peace Accord. Congratulations. The word was delivered without warmth, but Gemma didn't care. They'd won. Against all odds, against all expectations, they'd actually won. The chamber erupted into applause from some corners and grumbling from others. Gemma turned to Mordecai and found him looking at her with such open joy that it took her breath away. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," he corrected. "You changed centuries of prejudice with 3 months of honesty. You are extraordinary." He kissed her again, and this time Gemma didn't even notice the cameras. The aftermath of the hearing was chaotic but joyful. Gemma's parents threw a small party to celebrate, and Mordecai's vampire allies attended, creating an awkward but ultimately successful mixing of the two worlds. Lilith brought a bottle of wine that cost more than Gemma's car. Nikolai, the Western king who Gemma had finally met during the process, told elaborate stories about Mordecai's misspent youth that made everyone laugh. Even Vanessa attended, hovering at the edges but clearly trying. She congratulated Gemma quietly, and Gemma thanked her, and it wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. But the real celebration came 3 months later, as autumn turned to winter. Mordecai had been planning something, Gemma knew, but he'd refused to tell her what. He took her to a restored manor house outside the city, a place that had once belonged to a vampire lord and had been converted into a private event space. When they arrived, Gemma was surprised to find the place decorated with flowers and candles, intimate and beautiful. "What is this?" she asked. "Our celebration," Mordecai said simply. "The hearing was theirs, this is ours." He'd invited a small group, her parents, Lilith and Nikolai, a few close friends from both their lives. They gathered in the manor's grand ballroom, and Mordecai stood before them all with Gemma at his side. "3 months ago," he said, "Gemma and I won the right to be together officially. But that was a legal recognition, not an emotional one. Tonight I wanted to gather the people who matter most to us and make a different kind of declaration." He turned to Gemma and took both her hands. "I have loved you since the first night I met you. I have chosen you every day since, and tonight I want to ask if you will choose me in return, not just for now but for forever." Gemma's heart stopped. "Mordecai." "I am not proposing marriage," he clarified quickly. "Not yet, not until you're ready. But I am asking if you will accept the turning when the time comes, if you will join me in immortality, so that we need never fear time running out." Gemma had known this conversation was coming eventually, but she hadn't expected it tonight. She looked around the room at the faces of people she loved, people who had supported them through everything. Looked at Mordecai, at the vulnerability and hope in his silver eyes. "Yes," she said. "When I'm ready, yes. I want forever with you." The relief and joy that flooded Mordecai's face was worth every difficult moment of the past 6 months. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was something precious, and Gemma held him back just as tightly. "When?" he asked quietly, for her ears only. "When will you be ready?" Gemma pulled back to look at him. "Soon. Not tonight, but soon. I want to spend a few more years as human, experience some things while I still can. But then I want to be with you, properly, forever." "I can wait," Mordecai promised. "I have all the time in the world." They spent the evening celebrating with their small gathered family, eating and drinking and dancing. Gemma's father gave an awkward but heartfelt toast about accepting the unexpected. Her mother cried happy tears. Lilith told embarrassing stories about Mordecai that made Gemma love him even more for his very human flaws. Late in the evening, Gemma found herself alone with Mordecai on the manor's terrace, looking out over the gardens dusted with the season's first snow. "Are you happy?" Mordecai asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Incredibly," Gemma said. "Are you?" "I did not think I could feel this way again," Mordecai admitted. "I had forgotten what it was like to have something to look forward to, someone to build a future with. You gave that back to me." "You gave me the courage to be honest about what I wanted," Gemma said, "to stop being the quiet, invisible sister and start being myself." "You were always yourself," Mordecai corrected gently. "You just needed people to see it." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the snow fall. Then Gemma said, "Tell me about forever. What will it be like?" "Different," Mordecai said. "The world changes constantly and you will change with it, but some things remain constant. The need for connection, the value of love, the importance of choosing someone and being chosen in return. And you'll be there for all of it?" "Every moment," Mordecai promised. "Every year, every decade, every century. I will be beside you, watching you grow and change and become whatever you choose to be. And I will be grateful every day that you chose me first." Gemma turned in his arms and kissed him, slow and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she said. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you," Mordecai replied, "and I'm not scared at all, because I know we can face anything together." 2 years later, on a crisp autumn night, very much like the one where Gemma first met Mordecai, she made her choice. She was 26, had traveled and learned and experienced everything she wanted to as a human. She'd taken the new job and excelled at it, built relationships with patrons and colleagues that enriched her life. She'd mended things with Vanessa as much as was possible, not to closeness but to a cautious friendship. She'd watched her parents accept Mordecai fully into the family, watching them joke and debate with him like any son-in-law. And through it all, Mordecai had been beside her, patient and steady and endlessly loving, waiting for her to be ready. "I'm ready," she told him one evening in his apartment, the same one where she'd spent that first night after Vanessa's revelation. "I want to be turned." Mordecai set down the book he'd been reading and looked at her with complete focus. "Are you certain, or there is no undoing it?" "I'm certain," Gemma said. "I've had everything I wanted from my human life. Now I want my immortal one. With you." The turning was done in private, with only Lilith present as witness and guide. Mordecai had explained the process beforehand, the pain and the danger and the possibility that it might not take. But Gemma trusted him, trusted in the bond they'd built over 2 years of love and patience. When Mordecai's fangs pierced her throat, the pain was intense but brief. She felt her human life drain away, felt something new and powerful and ancient rush in to replace it. When she woke 3 days later in Mordecai's bed, she opened her eyes to a world transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, every sense heightened to impossible levels. She could hear Mordecai's heartbeat in the next room, slow and steady, could smell the night air through closed windows, could feel the power humming through her veins. She got up and found Mordecai sitting in his armchair, the same place he'd been that first morning. When he saw her, he stood, and there was such hope and fear in his expression that it made her smile. "Hey," she said, and her voice sounded different to her own ears, richer somehow. "Hey," he replied. "How do you feel?" "Different," Gemma said. "Good different, like I'm more myself than I've ever been." Mordecai crossed to her in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she would have struggled to breathe if breathing had still been essential. "I was so afraid it wouldn't work, that I would lose you." "You're not getting rid of me that easily," Gemma said into his chest. "You're stuck with me now, literally forever." He laughed, the sound wet with unshed tears, and kissed the top of her head. "I can think of no fate I would prefer." They spent the first year of Gemma's immortality learning. Mordecai taught her to control her new strength, to manage the hunger, to navigate vampire society as one of them rather than as a curious human. She learned the history of their kind, the politics and alliances and ancient grudges that shaped their world. She learned to fight, to defend herself against potential threats, and discovered she had a natural talent for strategy that surprised everyone, including herself. But she also kept one foot in the human world. She continued working at the library, though she had to be more careful about sun exposure, and explained her pale skin and odd hours as a medical condition. She maintained relationships with human friends and family, watching them age while she stayed frozen at 26. It was bittersweet, knowing she would outlive them all, but Mordecai helped her navigate the grief. "You honor them by remembering," he told her once after her grandmother's funeral, "by carrying their stories forward into the future. That is what immortality allows us to do. We become living memory for those who came before." 5 years after her turning, Gemma and Mordecai finally married in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. Her parents were there, older but still vibrant, thrilled to see their daughter happy. Vanessa came too, now divorced and working as a therapist, having found her own path to healing. The vampire rulers attended in formal regalia, and the event made international news as a symbol of the growing cooperation between species. But Gemma's favorite moment of the day was standing on the terrace at sunset with Mordecai, watching the last rays of light disappear behind the horizon before they could safely go outside for the reception. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing me that night, for standing up when Vanessa tried to tear me down." "Thank you for letting me," Mordecai replied, "for giving me permission to love you openly instead of in shadows. Do you regret any of it? The scrutiny, the politics, the complications?" "Not for a moment," Mordecai said firmly. "You are worth every difficulty, every challenge. You are the best choice I have ever made." Gemma leaned into him, marveling at how far they'd come from that terrible night at Vanessa's wedding. "I love you. I love you," Mordecai said, "for now and for always." 20 years later, Gemma stood in the council chambers where she and Mordecai had once fought for recognition. But today she was there in a different capacity, as a newly appointed representative to the Human-Vampire Relations Committee, working to improve the systems that governed their integrated society. The exception process they'd fought for had grown into a full-scale revision of the peace accord, removing the prohibition on interspecies relationships entirely. Dozens of couples had followed in their footsteps, human and vampire building lives together. There were still challenges, still prejudices to overcome, but the world was changing. Mordecai attended the session, sitting in the gallery to watch his wife work. Gemma caught his eye at one point and saw the pride and love there, as strong as it had been 2 decades ago. After the session adjourned, they walked home through the city streets, hand in hand. Gemma's parents had passed several years ago, peacefully and surrounded by family. Vanessa had remarried and found happiness with a kind man who helped her continue to heal. The world had moved forward, as worlds do, but Gemma and Mordecai remained, constants in the changing tide. "Do you ever miss being human?" Mordecai asked as they walked. Gemma considered. "Sometimes. I miss the simplicity, the not knowing what would come next. But I don't regret the choice. I have you, and I have time to do work that matters. That's more than most people get." "You would have done work that mattered even as a human," Mordecai said. "Maybe," Gemma allowed, "but I wouldn't have had centuries to perfect it, and I wouldn't have you beside me the whole time." They reached their home, a renovated townhouse that balanced modern comfort with historic charm. Inside, surrounded by their combined collections of books and art and memories, they settled into their evening routine, reading and talking and simply being together as they had been for over 2 decades and would be for centuries more. Because Vanessa had tried to expose Gemma's love as something shameful, and the Vampire King had risen and said, "I choose her now." He had claimed her publicly, protected her fiercely, and loved her patiently. And Gemma had chosen him in return, again and again, until their choice became a foundation strong enough to build a forever on. And they lived that forever together, happily and completely, exactly as they'd promised they would.